October 6, 1973. A day of absolute silence in Israel, known as Yom Kippur. The streets were empty, the markets closed, and the army was on leave. But, across the borders, in the scorching deserts of Egypt and Syria, a storm was brewing that no one saw coming. While prayers for peace filled the air, hundreds of tanks and thousands of troops were already crossing the lines. This was not just an attack. It was a calculated plan to erase a nation from the map of the world. Within hours, an entire people stood on the very edge of extinction. Even before the prayers in the synagogues could fade, the roar of tanks on the borders unleashed hell. Suddenly, veins of blood began to spread across the map, as if the earth itself was changing color, and in the darkness of the bunker, those trembling eyes told the whole story, that for Israel, there was no way out.
Lord, please protect us.
The silence of the desert was not just broken, it was annihilated, as the Egyptian forces unleashed a flood of steel and fire across the Suez Canal. At the very same moment, high in the north, Syrian tanks descended like a tidal wave from the Golan Heights, crushing everything in their path. The legendary Bar-Lev line, Israel's pride and its wall of sand, began to crumble under the relentless pressure of high-power water jets and heavy artillery. What was once thought invincible, was now falling apart like a sandcastle against a rising tide, leaving the gates to the heart of the nation wide open. Intelligence had failed, and the shock was paralyzing. In the dim light of the bunkers, the air grew thick with a cold, suffocating despair. By the time the generals realized the scale of the disaster, the enemy was already knocking at the door. In those first 48 hours, the price of surprise was paid in blood and iron. Over 500 tanks lay burning across the Sinai, a haunting graveyard of pride and blackened steel. The message was stark, cold, and final. The forces were depleted, the reserves were too far, and the path to the cities was clear. Every radar ping marked a step closer to a catastrophe no one had dared to imagine. Inside the war room, Prime Minister Golda Meir stared at the reports with trembling hands. As the red arrows on the map pushed deeper, the shadow of total destruction loomed over the horizon, asking one terrifying question: is this the end? The year was 1973. And the Middle East was on fire. This was no longer a war for land. It was a brutal struggle for survival. Egyptian tanks had shattered the front lines, and were now just miles from Tel Aviv. In the war rooms, deathly silence reigned, as the heart of Israel began to tremble. In that darkest hour, Israel faced total annihilation. With no options left, the unthinkable was ordered. The Samson option was activated, and nuclear missiles were fueled for launch. Humanity stood on the razor's edge. As the world prepared for a nuclear apocalypse, one wrong move, and everything would turn to ash. This was the moment the world held its breath. A regional conflict had become a global catastrophe. The shadows of World War III loomed large. Soviet weapons poured into the hands of Arab forces. While Washington watched in terror, two superpowers, America and Russia, stood eye to eye, their fingers resting on the nuclear trigger. To save their ally, America launched Operation Nickel Grass. The largest military airlift in history had begun. A massive bridge of steel filled the skies. As cargo planes roared across the Atlantic, they carried tanks, artillery, and the last hope of a nation. Every pilot knew they were racing against the clock of destiny. The roar of American engines met the grind of Soviet steel. The world watched the horizon, waiting for the end. One haunting question remained. Can this massive lifeline reach the front lines in time? Or will the map of history be erased forever? Time was fading. The endgame was here. And the shadow of the cloud remained.
When everything seemed lost, the tide of war began to shift in a way no one expected.
When all seemed lost, and the end was certain, a desperate gamble was made. A plan so bold that no one saw it coming. Israeli commanders searched for a single weakness. And they found it. A tiny gap in the enemy lines, waiting to be exploited. Just when the shadows of defeat seemed to swallow everything, and the end of a nation felt certain, a masterstroke of military brilliance was about to unfold. This was a gamble born of pure desperation. A plan so daring that no strategist could have predicted its impact. The Israeli high command searched relentlessly for a single fatal flaw in the enemy's wall, and finally, they found it. A narrow gap lay hidden within the enemy lines, waiting to be torn wide open. This was the crack in the fortress, the one fleeting opportunity to strike back at the heart of the advance. Under the veil of a moonless night, the desert sands began to tremble beneath the weight of iron. Israeli tank divisions moved like ghosts through the dunes, silent and deadly. Their objective was clear: cross the Suez Canal once again and bring the fight to the enemy's doorstep. The hunters were fast becoming the hunted. This was history unfolding in real time. Witnessing one of the most massive tank battles the world has ever recorded. Thousands of tons of cold steel clashed violently under the unforgiving desert sun. Massive clouds of black smoke choked the horizon. As General Ariel Sharon pushed his armored spearhead deeper into enemy territory, destiny was being rewritten with every shell fired, carved into the earth with blood, and fire, and iron. The balance of power had been shattered, and the fate of the entire region hung by a thread. The world watched in absolute awe as the impossible became a reality, and the path to victory was cleared. The 1973 war finally came to an end, after 19 days of brutal combat. But it left behind a world that was forever changed. This conflict proved to the global stage that the combination of cutting-edge technology and raw human spirit could achieve the impossible. Israel had survived the onslaught. The myth of being invincible had been crushed into the desert dust, and the pride of a nation was deeply wounded. Thousands of lives were lost in the sand. Economies lay in ruins, and a global oil crisis gripped the entire planet. This chapter of history teaches us a chilling lesson about the lengths a nation will go to when its very survival is pushed to the edge of the cliff.